Sir, this is my identification.
I want them out of here.
Sir, what seems to be the problem?
I live here.
We're just making sure.
Is everything all right?
In fake HOA cops targets black teen, then his FBI dad showed them up. A late-night walk home turns into a nightmare for Marcus. A black teenager stopped by to self-proclaim HOA cops, who demand to search his bag and prove he belongs in his own neighborhood. As tension escalates in Chapter 2, Marcus is humiliated and stripped of dignity while neighbors watch in silence, and in Chapter 3 his father David, an FBI agent, rushes to the scene. Chapter 4 sees real police arrive, siding with the imposters and treating Marcus as guilty until David steps forward in Chapter 5 with his FBI badge, flipping the balance of power. In Chapter 6, David exposes the men's lies as nothing more than paper walls, unraveling their authority while Marcus refuses to be silenced. Chapter 7 shifts to the family's living room, where Marcus wrestles with belonging and confronts the painful silence of neighbors, followed by Chapter 8, where a secret recording of the incident goes viral, forcing the community to face the truth and stripping the fake officers of their standing. And finally, in Chapter 9, poetic justice arrives as Greg and Tom lose jobs, reputation, and authority, while Marcus claims his voice, showing the neighborhood and the world that dignity and truth cannot be erased. The night was quiet, except for the shuffle of Marcus Daniels's sneakers against the pavement. The gated streets of Fairview Oaks lay under dim street lamps, their glow bouncing off manicured lawns and trimmed hedges. This was supposed to be home, safe. But Marcus felt the prickle of eyes on his back. Two men leaned against a white SUV parked crooked near the curb. Both wore navy polo shirts with patches stitched sloppily on the chest. HOA security. The patches looked new, ironed on. Their arms were crossed, and their eyes tracked Marcus like floodlights. Marcus adjusted his backpack strap, trying to keep his breathing steady. "Evening," he said cautiously, offering a polite nod. One of the men straightened. "Hold up there." His voice was gruff, like he'd been waiting for this moment. "Where are you headed?" Marcus blinked. "Home, just down the street." "Home, huh?" The second man chuckled. "Don't think I've seen you around here. You visiting somebody?" Marcus's lips pressed thin. He'd lived here since he was 12. He'd seen these men mowing their lawns, complaining at HOA meetings his dad sometimes mentioned, but he kept his tone calm. "I live here," Marcus said. "Oak Ridge Drive." The first man smirked. "Funny, don't recall seeing you. What's your address?" Marcus hesitated. His mom always said, "Never give strangers your address, even in your own neighborhood." He shifted his weight. "I don't think I need to tell you that. Don't get smart, kid." The second man snapped. "You don't just walk around here at night without being noticed." "Lot of break-ins lately." Marcus's chest tightened. He'd heard no such thing. "I just came from basketball practice." Marcus explained. "I'm tired. I want to go home." The first man stepped forward, blocking half the sidewalk. "Then prove you live here. Show us some ID." Marcus's pulse quickened. He remembered his dad's voice, steady and commanding. "Stay calm. Don't escalate, but don't give away what's yours." "My ID's in my backpack," Marcus said slowly. "But why should I show you? You're not police." The men exchanged a glance, then laughed. Low and mean. "Kid's got an attitude," one muttered. "Yeah," the other agreed. "That's how it starts. First, mouthy, then trouble." Marcus looked past them, down the street lined with silent houses. Curtains shifted in one window, someone watching, not helping. His throat tightened. "I'm not looking for trouble," Marcus said quietly. "I'm just walking home." The taller man leaned closer. His breath smelled like cigarettes. "See, that's the thing. People like you wandering around. Folks get nervous." The words hit like stones. Marcus swallowed hard. "People like me don't play dumb," the man shot back. "You don't belong out here after dark." A spark of anger lit in Marcus's chest. He thought of his mother's laugh, echoing in their kitchen, of his father's framed FBI commendation, hanging proudly in the living room. He belonged here more than these self-appointed guards. "I do belong," Marcus said firmly. "This is my neighborhood." The man's eyes narrowed. "Prove it." Marcus gripped his backpack strap tighter, his knuckles pale. "You don't have the right to ask me that," he said. The shorter man stepped around the SUV, blocking the sidewalk completely. His smile was cold. "Kid, we make the rules around here. HOA doesn't want strangers loitering. You matched the description." "What description?" Marcus demanded, his voice breaking. The man shrugged. "Young male, hoodie out late. Suspicious, Marcus's chest rose and fell rapidly. He wanted to run, but his father's warnings anchored him. Running makes them chase. Standing your ground makes them squirm. He stood taller, though his heart hammered. Move, Marcus said. The taller man crossed his arms, unmoving. Not until you show us some proof. Silence fell heavy. The buzz of a street lamp hummed above. From the shadows, Marcus heard a faint ding, someone's phone recording. Another neighbor watching, still silent. Marcus clenched his jaw. This is my home, he whispered, voice trembling but resolute, and the men smiled, as if the game had just begun. The SUV's headlights flickered as if mocking Marcus's resolve. The men stood like stone, their shadows stretching across the pavement. Go on, Kit. The taller one pressed, his hand twitching near his belt as if he carried a weapon. Show us what you got in that backpack. Marcus shook his head slowly. I'm not showing you anything. You're not police. The shorter man smirked. Police, son. We work with the police. You think they'll take your side over ours? Marcus's breath came quicker. I haven't done anything. Walking around at night is doing something, the taller man said. His voice lowered into a growl. Kids like you wandering where you don't belong usually means trouble. Marcus's heart pounded so loudly it drowned the cicadas buzzing in the trees. He gripped his phone, thumb hovering over his mom's number. I'm calling my parents, Marcus said firmly. The shorter man lunged forward, snatching the phone out of his hand. Not so fast, give that back. Marcus's voice cracked. The man dangled, it just out of reach, his grin sharp. What's the hurry? Afraid they'll find out what you're really up to. I told you I live here, Marcus insisted. You can ask anybody. Oak Ridge Drive, number 34. Yeah, the taller man sneered. Easy to memorize a random address. You think we're stupid. Marcus's chest tightened. His lifeline, the phone, was gone. His words felt like smoke, dissolving in the night air. Please, Marcus said softly, struggling to keep his voice steady. That's my phone. The shorter man tapped the screen, scrolling. Look at this, Mom, Dad, Coach Williams. Oh, you got yourself a whole crew. Real suspicious. That's not suspicious, Marcus said, voice trembling. That's my life. The taller man laughed coldly. Your life, huh? Around here, we decide what looks normal. And you don't look normal. Marcus's stomach dropped. Neighbors watched from lit windows, some phones raised, none stepping out. He caught a glimpse of Mrs. Blake, the woman who brought pies to the HOA meetings. She saw, she turned away. Silence weighed on Marcus, heavier than the men's words. Give me my phone back, he said again. Firmer. The shorter man shoved it into his pocket. We'll hold on to it until the cops come. Let them sort you out. Marcus's throat tightened. You're calling the police. Damn right we are, the taller one said, pulling out his own phone. And when they get here, you better hope they believe your little story. Marcus's knees felt weak, but he forced himself upright. This isn't fair. I'm not a criminal. The shorter man's laugh was sharp. Fair, kid, life ain't fair, especially not for you. Marcus stared at him, rage burning beneath fear. Why are you doing this? He asked quietly. The taller man met his gaze without flinching. Because we keep this neighborhood safe, and people like you. Well, let's just say you stand out. Marcus's fists clenched. He wanted to shout, to push past, to fight, but his father's lessons echoed. Anger is what they want. Dignity is what they can't stand. He sat down slowly on the curb, backpack pressed against his chest like armor. His voice was low but steady. You can humiliate me, but you can't make me not belong here. The shorter man sneered. Big words for a kid on the curb. The taller one dialed, pressing his phone to his ear. Yeah, officer, got a suspicious male here. Won't identify himself. Could be dangerous. Marcus shut his eyes, heart racing. The night stretched long, his words whispered like a prayer into the dark. This is my home. And for the first time, the men looked uneasy, as if the truth itself unsettled them more than his defiance. The pavement was cold against Marcus's legs as he sat on the curb, knees drawn up, his backpack pressed into his chest like a shield. But it couldn't stop the hollow ache in his stomach. The shorter man stood guard, arms folded, while the taller one paced, phone pressed tight to his ear. Yeah, officer, we need a cruiser out here. Kid refuses to identify himself. Might be armed, unhung. We'll hold him till you arrive. Armed. The word hit Marcus like a punch. I don't have anything, he whispered, voice raw. The shorter man glanced down at him with a smirk. That's what they all say inside a quiet house on Oak Ridge Drive. Marcus's mother, Sandra, clutched her own phone so tightly her knuckles whitened. She'd been waiting for Marcus to check in after practice, but instead of his cheerful "I'm on my way, Mom," she got silence. Then, a shaky voice from a neighbor she barely knew. "You should check outside, your boy's in trouble with some HOA guys." Her hands trembled as she punched in her husband's number. The line clicked. "David," her voice cracked. "What's wrong?" His tone sharpened instantly, all warmth replaced by steel. "It's Marcus," she said, breath rushing. "To men fake security or something, they stopped him. They've got his phone. Someone said they called the police." For a moment, silence. Then David's measured voice. "Where?" "By the East Gate, near Maple Street. I'm on my way." "David, stay inside. Lock the door. I'll handle it." On the curb, Marcus's eyes stung. He wanted to disappear into the night. The shorter man's shadow loomed over him. "You think sitting there makes you look innocent?" the man taunted. "I am innocent," Marcus muttered. "Then why you so nervous?" "Because you took my phone," Marcus shot back. "Because you're treating me like a criminal when I'm just trying to get home." The taller man ended his call and pocketed his phone. "Cops will be here any minute. You better hope you don't match any descriptions on their list tonight." Marcus lifted his head, defiance breaking through fear. "You can't just decide who I am." The shorter man leaned down, sneering. "Kid, the world already decided. You just don't know it yet." David's car tore through the empty streets, headlights slicing the dark. His jaw was locked tight, eyes narrowed. He'd spent his career profiling criminals, chasing lies, uncovering threats, but nothing compared to the fury of knowing his boy was being profiled in his own neighborhood. He gripped the steering wheel harder. "Stay calm, David. Rage gets you nowhere. Precision wins battles." Back at the curb, Marcus spotted blue and red lights flickering faintly down the street. The cruiser was coming. His chest constricted. He whispered, almost to himself, "Dad, please hurry." The taller man caught it and smirked. "Daddy gonna save you." Newsflash, Kid Daddy ain't here. But the words rang hollow as the sound of an engine grew louder. Closer. Inside the Daniels kitchen, Sandra paced, hands trembling as she muttered to herself. She glanced at the framed commendation on the wall. "David Daniels, Special Agent, FBI." The irony bit deep. He'd dismantled criminal rings across states. Yet here, on their own street, their son was hunted like prey. Her stomach churned. "Please, God, don't let them hurt him before David gets there." The police cruiser rolled up, headlights blazing. The HOA men straightened, puffing their chests like proud watchdogs. Marcus froze, breath shallow. Two officers stepped out. One rested a hand on his taser. "There he is," the taller man said quickly, pointing. "That's the kid. Wouldn't give ID, real suspicious." Marcus rose to his feet slowly, hands trembling but lifted in front of him. His voice was low, desperate but firm. "My wallet's in my backpack. My ID is inside. It has my address. Please look at it." The officers didn't move toward the bag. One shook his head. "Could be stolen. Could be fake." Marcus's throat closed. "It's not. It's mine. That's my address. This is my home." The shorter man laughed, clapping one officer on the back. "See what I mean? Mouthy kid. Thinks he's smarter than everyone." The officer's hand tightened on his taser. "Better keep still, son." Marcus's pulse hammered. His future shrank to this street, this moment, this silence. And then headlights cut across the scene, blinding for a second. A sleek black sedan pulled up. The engine purred low before shutting off. The driver's door opened. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out, suit jacket unbuttoned, eyes burning like coals. David Daniels had arrived. The night air shifted the moment David Daniels stepped from the car. His polished shoes struck the pavement with a rhythm that silenced even the insects. Marcus's eyes widened. Relief hit like a wave, but fear clung stubbornly. His father wasn't a god, just a man, and these men had power, or at least the illusion of it. The taller Hoff enforcer straightened, puffing out his chest. "Evening," he said sharply. "Can we help you?" David's gaze swept over the scene, his son on the curb, the sneer on the shorter man's face, the officers standing stiff with their hands on weapons. His jaw tightened. "You can start," David said evenly, "by telling me why my son is being treated like a criminal in his own neighborhood." One of the officers stepped forward, voice clipped. "Sir, please, step back. We're handling this." David's eyes locked on the man. "Handling what?" "A teenager walking home." "Sir," the officer repeated, firmer, "you're interfering in a police matter. Back up." Marcus's throat constricted. "Dad," the shorter HOA man smirked, cutting him off. So this is, Daddy makes sense. Kid's mouthy, just like him. David turned his head slowly, his stare slicing through the man like glass. You took my son's phone. The man shifted, trying to sound tough. He was acting suspicious. We needed to keep the situation contained until police arrived. That phone, David said, voice sharp as a blade, is property theft. And you detained him without cause. That's kidnapping. The taller man bristled. Now wait just a minute. We're HOA security. David's eyebrow twitched. No, you're two men in polo shirts impersonating authority. There is no HOA security, not in this neighborhood. So let's call things what they are: harassment, intimidation, and unlawful detention. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, but the one with his hand still hovering over his taser hardened his voice. Sir, calm down. We don't know who you are. What we do know is this young man matched a suspicious description, refused to comply. We're just doing our jobs. Marcus's fists clenched. I told you I live here. My wallet's in my bag. You wouldn't even look. The shorter man barked a laugh, probably stolen from some real resident. Something inside David snapped, but outwardly he stayed still. He stepped closer, every syllable precise. You've made 3 claims, David said, eyes fixed on the officer. Suspicious description, known compliance, possible theft. Did you verify any of them? The officer shifted. We don't have to justify. Yes, you do, David cut in. His voice lowered, controlled but deadly. You're sworn to protect and serve, not to profile and assume. Sir David's hand moved slowly into his jacket. The officer stiffened, one shouting, hands where I can see them. Marcus gasped. Dad. David ignored the panic. He pulled out a black leather case and flicked it open. The gold letters catching under the street lamp. Federal Bureau of Investigation. The silence that followed was suffocating. David's tone remained flat. Special Agent David Daniels, FBI. Now tell me again why you're detaining my son. The taller HOA man's mouth fell open. The shorter one stuttered. This doesn't change. It changes everything, David snapped. Because now your lies are evidence. Every word you've spoken tonight is on record. Every action taken against my son is subject to federal review. The officers' faces paled. One cleared his throat. Agent Daniels, we didn't know. That's the problem, David said, voice cutting like glass. You didn't care to know. You saw a black teenager, an assumed criminal. You ignored his ID. You threatened him. You allowed civilians impersonating security to dictate your response. Marcus's chest swelled. His father's words were more powerful than shouting, more terrifying than fists. The shorter man tried to recover, voice trembling. He was out late, wandering, hoodie on. What were we supposed to think? David turned slowly, pinning him with a glare that froze him mid-breath. You were supposed to think, David said, each word a hammer, that maybe the boy walking home belongs, that maybe he is someone's son, someone's brother, someone's neighbor. The taller man opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Marcus stood, legs unsteady, but his voice steadier than before. You treated me like I didn't matter, he said. His eyes burned, but his chin lifted, like I wasn't human, and all I did was walk home. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the weight of truth. One officer lowered his head, the other muttered, we should get a report written. David didn't blink. Yes, you will, and every word better be exact, because I'll be reading it. The shorter man scoffed weakly. You can't. David stepped closer, his height casting a shadow over both men. I can, and I will. And you too. You'll explain why you pretended to be security. That's a federal offense. Impersonating authority. You thought no one would challenge you. You thought silence would protect you. His voice dropped, low and final. Tonight, silence is over. Marcus exhaled a shaky breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His father's words wrapped around him like armor. For the first time that night, it was the men who looked afraid. The badge glinted beneath the street lamp, catching every nervous glance. David didn't wave it around. He held it steady, calm, deliberate. That stillness carried more weight than shouting ever could. The taller officer cleared his throat. Agent Daniels, if we'd known. David cut him off with a raised hand. You didn't need to know who I was. You needed to do your job. Tell me, did either of you ask my son his name? The shorter officer shifted uncomfortably. Not yet. Did you look at his wallet, sitting in plain sight? No. David's eyes narrowed. But you accepted the word of two men wearing polo shirts with iron-on patches. The taller HOA man sputtered. Now hold on, these are legitimate uniforms. We represent the Homeowners Association. David tilted his head. Which chapter? What? Which chapter of the H? Name it. His tone was flat, surgical. The man blinked. Fairview Oaks, HOA, obviously, really. David's lips curved in the ghost of a smile. Because I happen to know, Fairview Oaks HOA has no sanctioned security detail, only a landscaping committee and a budget oversight board. The shorter man shifted, sweat beading on his temple. We wear volunteers. Neighborhood watch. Neighborhood watch, David repeated, voice dripping with disdain. Neighborhood Watch does not detain minors. Neighborhood Watch does not confiscate phones. Neighborhood Watch does not impersonate law enforcement with fake badges. The taller man's face reddened. We were just trying to keep the neighborhood safe. David stepped closer, his voice low and lethal. By harassing a 16-year-old boy walking home from practice, by accusing him of theft without evidence, by calling armed officers to intimidate him. The silence crackled. Marcus shifted beside his father, his voice breaking the tension. Dad, he whispered, they didn't even let me talk. They just decided. David glanced at his son, his expression softening for just a heartbeat. Then his eyes snapped back to the men, sharp as blades. Decided, David repeated. Exactly. You decided guilt before fact, suspicion before truth, skin before identity. The shorter officer tried to regain footing. Agent Daniels, with respect, we thought he matched a suspect. What suspect? David snapped. Give me a description. The officer hesitated. Male, 16 to 20, dark clothing. David spread his hands toward Marcus. That's half the teenagers in this country. Convenient description for criminalizing whoever you want. The officers fell silent. David turned to the HOA men again. Now, explain why you stole his phone. The shorter one stammered. We didn't steal it. We just held it, without consent, without warrant, without authority. David cut in. His words fell like hammer strikes. That is theft. The taller one blurted. We were going to give it back. To who? David's tone sharpened. Not to him. You said you didn't believe he lived here. So who were you giving it back to? Yourself. The man faltered, lips moving soundlessly. David leaned forward slightly. His voice dropped into a calm, terrifying register. Say it again, out loud. Who does that phone belong to? The man swallowed hard. Him. David's eyes glinted. Exactly. Him. My son. Marcus's heart surged. Hearing those words, the validation struck deeper than any badge or authority. The shorter officer rubbed the back of his neck. Agent Daniels, maybe we can de-escalate. No, David snapped. We don't de-escalate lies. We dismantle them. He pulled out a small notebook and pen from his jacket. Names. Full names. Now, the HOA men glanced at each other, then at the officers. Do you want me to repeat myself? David asked softly. The taller one finally muttered. Greg Saunders. The shorter one swallowed. Tom Mitchell. David wrote the names without looking up. And officers. Both men straightened reluctantly, giving their names and badge numbers. David wrote them down with deliberate strokes. Then he closed the notebook with a snap. You will all write official reports, tonight, every detail. And if I find even one inconsistency, I will pursue obstruction charges. The officers nodded stiffly, shame creeping across their faces. The HOA men weren't so quiet. Greg muttered, You think you can scare us just because you're FBI? David turned slowly, his gaze icy. No, I don't need to scare you. Your own actions already condemned you. Tom tried to laugh, weak and shaky. Come on, this is ridiculous. Nobody's gonna take his word over ours. David's jaw tightened. He reached into his inner pocket again, not for the badge this time, but for a small recorder. He clicked it once, a faint beep, and then his voice, calm. Repeat that last statement. Tom froze. Marcus blinked. He's recording them. David's lips curled in a cold smile. That's what I thought. The men shifted, realizing too late that the game had changed. For the first time that night, Marcus saw something in their eyes he hadn't before: fear. The street was quiet except for the hum of the cruiser's engine. The neighbors who had been watching from windows lingered like shadows, curtains, cracked just enough to see the downfall. David stood tall, notebook in hand, badge at his chest. His voice cut through the night with surgical calm. Let's go back to the beginning. he said. You claimed to be HOA security. Do you have identification, credentials, a contract signed by the board? Greg Saunders, the taller man, shifted, his bluster draining. We don't need contracts. Everyone knows us. Everyone. David's eyebrow arched. Funny. I've lived here 6 years, and I've never seen an authorized security team. Care to explain that discrepancy? Greg's mouth opened, then closed. David turned to Tom. Tom swallowed. We're volunteers. People appreciate it. David's lips twitched in a humorless smile. Appreciate vigilantes patrolling with fake patches. Impersonating security is a federal offense. Paper walls. Gentlemen look strong until you touch them, and then they collapse. Marcus felt a chill. His father wasn't shouting. He was unweaving them thread by thread. The shorter officer cleared his throat, voice quiet. Agent Daniels, maybe we should verify with the HOA president. David nodded slowly. Yes. He pulled out his phone, scrolled, and tapped a number. After 2 rings, a sleepy voice answered. Hello, Mrs. Patel. This is Agent Daniels. Apologies for the late call. Quick question. Does Fairview Oaks HOA employ or sanction any neighborhood security patrol? A pause, then laughter, tired but incredulous. Of course not. We can barely afford to fix the pool pumps. Security? No. Who's asking? David's gaze locked on Greg and Tom as he said, 2 men standing in front of me, claiming to be HOA security. I'll call you tomorrow to discuss formal charges with the board. Good night. He ended the call. The silence afterward was deafening. Marcus stared at the men, watching their arrogance melt into unease. David spoke again, voice sharp. So, you detained my son under false authority. You withheld his property. You escalated to law enforcement with fabricated claims, and when officers arrived, they deferred to your lies instead of facts. He turned to the officers, his stare unrelenting. Do you understand the liability you've created? The taller officer's voice cracked. Agent Daniels, we didn't know. You didn't ask. David's tone sliced. You treated perception as truth. That is the foundation of systemic failure. And tonight, you proved it. Marcus's chest swelled not with relief, but with something heavier. The truth was out in the open, undeniable. But it didn't erase the humiliation he'd felt kneeling on the curb. Greg tried to rally, his voice desperate. We were just protecting our community. By criminalizing your neighbor's son, David shot back. By assuming the worst because of skin and silence, Tom muttered. We didn't mean you meant exactly what you did. David interrupted. Intent doesn't erase impact. And tonight, the impact is carved into my son's memory. Marcus's voice broke through, quiet but firm. You can't undo this. Everyone turned. Marcus stood taller than before, eyes burning. You can't take back the way you made me feel. Like I didn't belong, like I wasn't human. The words hung heavy, truer than any badge or law. David's eyes softened at his son, then hardened as he faced the group. Write your reports. Every word. I will follow each one. And when the dust settles, none of you will hide behind titles or excuses. He placed a steady hand on Marcus's shoulder. They counted on silence. Tonight, we're not silent. The men shifted, suddenly small against the weight of their crumbling walls. The Daniels' living room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of a lamp. Marcus sat on the couch, backpack still clutched to his chest as if letting go would make the night real again. Sandra knelt in front of him, brushing damp curls from his forehead. Baby, you're home now. You're safe. Marcus's voice cracked. Am I? They treated me like I didn't belong, right there, on the street I've lived on for years. Sandra's throat tightened. That's not about you, Marcus. That's about them. But they made it about me, Marcus said, his eyes glassy. Everyone watching, no one saying anything. It was like I was already guilty. David stood by the window, arms crossed, jaw rigid. His voice was low, bitter. Silence is the oldest accomplice. Those neighbors saw. They chose safety in their curtains instead of justice in their voices. Sandra turned sharply. Don't put this on them. They were scared too. David's laugh was humorless. Scared of what? Scared to stand beside a boy walking home. That fear is poison. It kills slowly, but it kills all the same. Marcus buried his face in his hands. Maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I never did. No, Sandra whispered fiercely, pulling his hands away. Don't you dare let them take that from you. You belong everywhere you set foot. They're the ones who don't belong in your story. The room fell quiet, heavy with the weight of her words. A knock broke the silence. Sandra and David exchanged a look. David moved first, opening the door. Mrs. Blake stood on the porch, wrapped in a robe, eyes downcast. She held a plate of cookies in trembling hands. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, she stammered. I saw what happened. I should have said something. David's stare was iced. But you didn't. Her lips quivered. I was afraid. Marcus's voice cut through, sharp and quiet. Afraid of what? Of being seen standing next to me. Mrs. Blake blinked, startled. No, I didn't mean you watched, Marcus said, his voice steady now. You watched me sit on that curb. You saw me beg them to believe me, and you closed your curtains. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't know what to do. Marcus's jaw tightened. Doing nothing was your choice. Sandra put a hand on his shoulder, but Marcus didn't look away. For the first time, his gaze held more power than pain. Mrs. Blake set the plate on the porch rail, whispering, I'm sorry, before slipping into the night. The cookies sat untouched. David closed the door slowly. The silence inside was heavier than before. Marcus exhaled, shaking his head. Sorry doesn't fix anything. David moved closer, placing a firm hand on his son's back. No, but your voice does. You spoke tonight, Marcus. You didn't let them erase you. Marcus looked up, tears shining but jaw set. Then I'll keep speaking. Sandra wrapped her arms around him, holding him tight. That's how we survive, and that's how we change it. The three sat together, bound by silence, but no longer the kind that betrayed. Morning sunlight spilled through the blinds, sharp and unforgiving. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, cereal untouched. His phone buzzed, non-stop messages from friends, teammates, numbers he didn't recognize. Why is everyone texting me? He asked, voice groggy. David slid his own phone across the table. On the screen was a video, shaky, grainy, filmed from a neighbor's window. The recording showed Greg and Tom blocking Marcus, voices clear as they mocked him. Marcus's stomach knotted as he watched himself on screen, clutching his backpack, voice cracking. That's my life. Sandra's hand covered his. It's everywhere, she said softly. Someone posted it to the community page. It spread overnight. The news already called. David's eyes narrowed. The same neighbors who stayed silent are suddenly eager to share what they saw. Truth is fashionable when it costs nothing. Marcus scrolled through comments, some supportive, some venomous. That poor boy. Always knew Greg was a bully. Kids shouldn't be out at night anyway. His chest tightened. I don't want people pitying me, he muttered. I don't want to be a headline. You're not a headline, David said firmly. You're a witness, and witnesses make liars stumble. The doorbell rang. Sandra flinched. David opened it to find a cluster of reporters on the sidewalk, microphones flashing. Agent Daniels, do you confirm your son was racially profiled by fake HOA officers? Marcus, how do you feel about the neighborhood's reaction? David raised a hand. No comment. He shut the door with a calm finality that silenced the room. Marcus slumped back. It's too big now. I just wanted to come home. Sandra knelt beside him, eyes shining. Sometimes home is where the fight comes to you. Later that day, the HOA held an emergency meeting in the community center. The room overflowed. Residents who had whispered last night now spoke in loud, righteous tones. Greg stood at the front, sweating. Tom beside him, pale as chalk. This is a misunderstanding, Greg stammered. We were only trying to keep the neighborhood safe. Safe from a boy walking home. A resident snapped. You lied about being security. Another shouted. Phones recorded. Heads shook. Voices rose. The paper walls David had named were falling brick by brick. Marcus sat in the back with his parents, feeling the weight shift. The same people who had closed their curtains now glared at Greg and Tom. But Marcus's jaw stayed tight. He whispered to his father, they're only mad because someone filmed it. If there was no video, I'd still be the suspect. David's eyes softened. You're right. Exposure isn't justice, but it is a start. Up front, the HOA president's gavel slammed, effective immediately. Greg Saunders and Tom Willis are banned from any neighborhood positions. We'll be working with law enforcement to investigate impersonation charges. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Greg's face reddened as he muttered, we were protecting our community. Marcus stood suddenly. The room quieted. His voice carried across the crowd. I am this community, and you tried to erase me from it. That's not protection. That's fear dressed as power. The silence that followed was louder than any applause. Greg's shoulders sagged. Tom avoided his gaze. David placed a steady hand on Marcus's back, pride radiating without a word. When the family walked out, the cameras were waiting again. But this time, Marcus didn't flinch. For once, the story wasn't written about him, it was spoken by him, and the neighborhood, once complicit in silence, had no choice but to listen. Weeks passed, but the echoes of that night didn't fade. They spread through the neighborhood, the city, and beyond that. Greg and Tom tried to bury themselves in silence, but the world didn't oblige. The local paper ran the headline, "Fake HOA, Security Target, Black Teen FBI Agent, Father Exposes Scheme." Social media amplified it, each share pulling another layer of their lies into daylight. Greg lost his contracting job within days, clients canceled, not wanting their names tied to his face. Tom's small business shuttered under boycott. Their names became shorthand for arrogance and exposure. The irony cut sharp. Men who had pretended to guard the community now found themselves unwelcome in it. But the fallout didn't stop with them. The two officers who had dismissed Marcus's fear were placed under review. Internal Affairs opened an inquiry. Their captain released a statement about ensuring community trust. For once, consequences didn't skip the uniform. Neighbors walked differently now. Sandra noticed it. First heads lowered, voices hushed. The same people who had once smiled politely at block parties now crossed the street when Greg appeared, avoiding his eyes. But Marcus, he walked taller, not because the pain had vanished, but because it had been seen, named, and couldn't be erased. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Marcus sat on the porch with his father. The cicadas sang their endless song. "Dad," Marcus said, voice soft, "do you think they learned anything?" David leaned back, gaze distant. "Maybe. Some people learn when the mirror cracks. Others just hate the mirror." Marcus frowned. Then, what was it all for? David turned, eyes steady. "For you, for us, for the ones who'll walk this street after you, carrying the memory of your stand. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about proof." Marcus nodded slowly. His hands tightened around his notebook, a place where he had begun to write down everything. Every word they said, every silence, every truth. Sandra joined them, carrying 3 mugs of tea. She sat beside Marcus, pressing a kiss to his hair. "You gave them no choice but to see you. That's power they can't take back." Marcus looked at her, then at David, then at the street where it all began. "I thought I didn't belong," he whispered. "But maybe I was the one showing them who actually belongs here." David's lips curved in the faintest smile. "That's poetic justice." The porch light flickered on, bathing them in its steady glow. Across the street, the Blake family's window curtain shifted. This time, Marcus didn't flinch at being watched. He met the shadowed eyes head on, unafraid. Because now, the silence belonged to someone else, and Marcus's voice had become louder than their fear.